My name is Rebecca, and I am 34 years old. My son Ethan is 9 and lives with autism and epilepsy. What should have been a fun family day at the amusement park turned into my worst nightmare. When my phone rang and I heard my 15-year-old niece Taylor sobbing, my heart stopped. Her words still haunt me. Mom said it was just a prank, but he will not wake up. I never imagined my sister-in-law Denise would deliberately target my disabled son. If you are watching this from the perspective of a special needs parent, please hit like and subscribe. The journey I am about to share might help you recognize warning signs I missed. Life as a single mother to a child with special needs was never the path I envisioned for myself. 3 years ago, my husband Michael was killed in a car accident on his way home from work. In one moment, our world shattered. I lost my partner, my best friend, and Ethan lost his father, the one person who could always calm him during his most difficult moments. Ethan was diagnosed with autism when he was 2. The signs were there from early on. He rarely made eye contact, had intense reactions to certain sounds and textures, and his speech development lagged behind other children his age. By age 4, he began having seizures, and the neurologist diagnosed him with epilepsy as well. Raising Ethan has been challenging, but also the greatest blessing of my life. He sees the world in ways I never could, the patterns in music that most people miss, the subtle changes in light that transform ordinary moments into something magical. His mind works differently, but beautifully. His condition requires a strict routine. Medications twice daily, therapy sessions 3 times a week, and carefully managed environments to prevent sensory overload that could trigger a seizure. Certain lights, especially flashing or strobing ones, loud, unexpected noises, and crowds, can all be dangerous triggers. Every day is a careful balancing act between helping Ethan experience the world and keeping him safe. After Michael died, his family initially rallied around us. His parents, though elderly and living in Florida, called regularly and visited when they could. But it was his brother James, who lived just 30 minutes away, who promised to step in and be a father figure for Ethan. James seemed sincere, and for the most part he tried. He would come over on weekends, take Ethan to the park when he was having a good day, and always remembered his birthday and holidays, with thoughtful gifts that showed he paid attention to Ethan's interests. The problem was never James. It was his wife, Denise. From the first time I met Denise at a family dinner years ago, something about her felt off. She smiled with her mouth but never her eyes when talking to me. When I was pregnant with Ethan, she made comments about how having children ruins your life and destroys your body, always with that same plastic smile. After Ethan was diagnosed, her true colors really showed. She would use phrases like, "if he was disciplined properly," or "kids these days are just labeled instead of parented." She never said these things in front of James, only when we were alone, or with other family members who would uncomfortably change the subject. Denise and James had one daughter, Taylor, who was now 15. Unlike her mother, Taylor was compassionate beyond her years. Perhaps witnessing her mother's behavior had given her a special sensitivity. Whatever the reason, Taylor adored Ethan and was one of the few people he genuinely lit up around. She learned about autism on her own, watching videos and reading books, so she could better understand her cousin. She knew exactly how to approach him, speaking softly and giving him space before trying to interact. Taylor became something of a protective older sister figure to Ethan, and one of the few people I trusted completely with his care. Over the years, there were many incidents with Denise that raised red flags. Once at a family Christmas gathering, she deliberately played loud Christmas music and turned on flashing tree lights after I had specifically mentioned that these could trigger Ethan. When he became overwhelmed and began stimming, rocking back and forth with his hands over his ears, she laughed and said, "See, he is fine. You just baby him too much." Another time, she brought a dessert to a family dinner that contained peanuts without telling anyone, despite knowing about Ethan's food sensitivities. When I confronted her, she claimed it was just a joke and that she forgot about his dietary restrictions. Each time something happened, James would step in and smooth things over. "That is just how Denise is," he would say. "She does not mean anything by it. You are just being too sensitive." After a while, I began to wonder if I was overreacting. Maybe I had become overprotective of Ethan. Maybe I was looking for slights where none existed. In recent months, Ethan had been making tremendous progress. His new occupational therapist had found activities that helped him regulate his sensory processing. His neurologist had adjusted his medication, and he had gone almost 6 months without a major seizure, the longest stretch since his diagnosis. He was even starting to form more complex sentences and engage in brief conversations. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about his future. I had considered cutting ties with Denise completely, but there were complications. James was Ethan's only uncle, and Taylor was like a sister to him. More importantly, before Michael died, he made me promise to keep his family in Ethan's life. "They are part of who he is," Michael had said. "No matter what, they are his blood." So I endured Denise's passive-aggressive comments and jokes for Michael's memory and for Ethan's sense of family. Besides, with Ethan's recent progress, I had begun to hope that even Denise might eventually come around. People can change, I told myself. Maybe seeing Ethan improve would help her understand him better. Maybe time would soften her heart. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. Some people do not change, and some hearts remain stubbornly closed to understanding. It was James who suggested the trip to Wildwood Amusement Park. "Ethan has been doing so well," he said during one of his weekend visits. "He deserves a fun day out, and they have that new sensory-friendly section we read about in the local paper." He was right about that. The park had recently added a designated area with gentler rides, quiet spaces, and subdued lighting, specifically designed for children with sensory processing issues. Still, I was hesitant. Even with all his progress, Ethan could be unpredictable in new environments. I do not know James. There would still be a lot of people, and the other parts of the park would have all those triggers. "We will stick to the sensory-friendly zone," James assured me, "and we will all be there to help." Taylor is excited about it too. She has been researching which attractions would be best for Ethan. The thought of Ethan experiencing something normal children his age enjoyed was tempting. He had been working so hard in therapy, and his therapist had been encouraging more controlled exposure to new environments. Maybe this could be good for him. "Let me think about it," I said, and spent the next week preparing as if we were going, while still reserving the right to cancel if Ethan was having a difficult day. I created a detailed schedule mapping out quiet spots for breaks, researching the least crowded times to attend, and preparing all of Ethan's favorite snacks, since he was particular about textures and flavors. I packed his noise-canceling headphones, sunglasses for light sensitivity, his comfort items, a small blue dinosaur toy, and a smooth stone he liked to rub when anxious, and of course all his medications. I even prepared what I called his crisis kit, extra doses of his anti-seizure medication, emergency contact information, and a detailed medical history that could be handed to paramedics if needed. The morning of the trip arrived, and Ethan woke up in good spirits. "Park today?" he asked, as he ate his breakfast of plain pancakes, cut into precise squares. "Yes, sweetheart. We are going to the special park I told you about. Remember our rules." This was part of our preparation routine. Reviewing expectations and plans helped Ethan feel secure. "Stay with family. Use my words if scared. Headphones if loud. Find quiet place if feeling fuzzy." He recited the guidelines we had practiced all week. "Perfect." I smiled, feeling a cautious optimism. "And who will be coming with us?" "Uncle James, Cousin Taylor." He paused, his fork hovering mid-air. "And Aunt Denise." I noticed the slight change in his tone at Denise's name. Children with autism might miss some social cues, but they are often acutely perceptive about who genuinely accepts them and who does not. Ethan had always sensed Denise's underlying disdain. James, Taylor, and Denise arrived at 9:30 a.m., right on schedule. Taylor immediately went to Ethan, kneeling to his level, but not touching him until he was ready. "Hey, Ethan. I found out they have a butterfly garden in the quiet section. Would you like to see that first? The butterflies have blue wings, your favorite color." Ethan nodded, a small smile forming. "Blue butterflies," he repeated. What caught me off guard was Denise's behavior. She was being nice. Not her usual performative niceness that barely concealed contempt, but something that almost seemed genuine. She complimented Ethan's dinosaur t-shirt and asked if he was excited about the butterfly garden without using the exaggerated patronizing tone she typically reserved for him. "You look great today, Rebecca," she said, eyeing my simple outfit of jeans and a light sweater. It must be nice to get out and do something fun for a change, instead of being stuck with doctors and therapists all the time. There it was, the subtle dig wrapped in a compliment. Some things never change. As I loaded Ethan's backpack into the car, I quietly explained to everyone about his needs for the day. He is doing well, but we need to be careful about triggers. No flashing lights, avoid very loud areas, and he needs a break every hour in a quiet spot. James nodded seriously, but Denise rolled her eyes slightly. We know. No fun allowed," she muttered under her breath. "It is not about no fun," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It is about making sure Ethan can enjoy the day without getting overwhelmed or having a medical emergency." "I was just joking," Denise said with that plastic smile. "Lighten up, Rebecca. It is supposed to be a fun day." The drive to the park was uneventful. Ethan sat between Taylor and me in the back seat, looking out the window and occasionally pointing out interesting sights. A red truck, a dog walking clouds that looked like animals. James drove while Denise controlled the radio, thankfully keeping the volume at a reasonable level. When we arrived at the park, it was busier than I had hoped. Even though we had come on a Thursday to avoid weekend crowds, the parking lot was nearly full. "Spring break for the county schools," James explained, seeing my worried expression. "But do not worry, the sensory section should still be less crowded." As we approached the entrance, the sounds of distant roller coasters, music and crowds of excited children filled the air. Ethan gripped my hand tighter, and I gave him a reassuring squeeze. "Remember, we can leave any time you want. Just tell me if it gets too much." Once inside, we headed straight for the sensory-friendly section on the east side of the park. True to its advertising, this area was noticeably calmer. The pathways were wider, the attractions gentler, and even the colors seemed more subdued. Ethan's grip on my hand loosened slightly as we entered the butterfly garden, a peaceful greenhouse with soft, natural lighting and the gentle sound of trickling water. As Taylor had promised, there were several blue morpho butterflies floating gracefully among the flowers. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. Ethan enjoyed the butterflies, rode a gentle boat ride through a quiet nature scene, and even interacted with a kind park employee who showed him how to feed the koi fish in a small pond. He was stimming more than usual, a sign that he was processing a lot of sensory information, but not showing signs of distress. Then James made a suggestion that would change everything. "Hey, Rebecca," he said as we finished our packed lunch in the sensory area's picnic section. "Taylor and I were talking, and we thought it might be nice if you got to enjoy some of the park too. You never get a break or get to do anything just for fun." I immediately shook my head. "I am fine. I am here for Ethan." "No, really," James insisted. "Denise and Taylor can take Ethan through the dinosaur walkthrough exhibit. It is still in the sensory-friendly zone. You and I could go check out some of the shops in the main square, maybe ride one adult ride. Just 30 minutes and we will have our phones on us the whole time." I glanced at Ethan, who was examining a leaf he had found with intense concentration. "I do not think that is a good idea. He does not do well with changes to the plan." "But I will be with him," Taylor chimed in. "He loves dinosaurs, and I researched it. The exhibit is designed to be sensory-friendly. No flashing lights, no loud noises, just cool dinosaur models that move very slowly. And Mom will be there too." She looked at her mother expectantly. Denise smiled that perfect smile. "Of course. I can handle one child for 30 minutes, Rebecca. I raised Taylor after all, and she turned out just fine. She placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, making him flinch slightly. We will have fun with the dinosaurs, will not we, buddy? Every instinct told me to say no. But James was looking at me with such sincerity, and Taylor seemed genuinely excited to show Ethan the dinosaurs. And was I being unfair to Denise? Maybe she was really trying to be better. Maybe I was the one holding on to old grudges. 30 minutes, I finally said. And you call me immediately if anything seems off. He has been doing well, but new places can be unpredictable. I knelt beside Ethan. Sweetie, would you like to go see the dinosaurs with Taylor and Aunt Denise? Mommy and Uncle James will meet you after. Ethan looked uncertain, but nodded slowly. Dinosaurs. With Taylor. He seemed to deliberately omit Denise's name. I took out his backpack and gave detailed instructions to both Taylor and Denise. His headphones are in the front pocket if it gets too loud. His comfort stone is in the side mesh pocket. If he starts saying he feels fuzzy, that could be a pre-seizure aura. Get him sitting down immediately and call me. His emergency medication is in this labeled container, one dissolving tablet under the tongue, if he has a seizure that lasts more than 2 minutes. Denise sighed dramatically. Rebecca, we are going to look at dinosaur statues, not climbing Mount Everest. You are making Taylor nervous with all these worst-case scenarios. I am not nervous, Taylor said firmly. I want to know what to do if Ethan needs help. It is important. I continued my instructions, ignoring Denise's eye rolling. After the dinosaur exhibit, go straight to the butterfly garden again. It is a good, quiet space. We will meet you there in 30 minutes, no later. As I reluctantly watched them walk away, Ethan holding Taylor's hand while Denise walked slightly ahead, a sense of dread settled in my stomach. Something felt wrong. I nearly called them back, but James gently touched my arm. He will be fine, Rebecca. Taylor knows what to do, and Denise, well, she is trying. Let's get you a coffee, and look at those artisan shops you mentioned earlier. Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was just 30 minutes after all. What could possibly go wrong? James and I wandered through the main square of the amusement park, but my mind never left Ethan. I checked my phone every few minutes, making sure the volume was turned all the way up, so I would not miss a call or text. He is fine, Rebecca, James said, after I checked my phone for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Taylor is with him, and she knows exactly what to do if he gets overwhelmed. I know, I said, putting my phone back in my pocket. I just worry. It is hard to turn it off. James stopped at a bench and gestured for me to sit down. Can I be honest with you for a minute? I think Denise is really trying to change. She knows she has been difficult in the past. I raised an eyebrow. Difficult is a very generous way to put it, James. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know she has said and done things that hurt you and Ethan. But she has been different lately. She actually asked questions about autism last week, real questions, like she wants to understand, and she was the one who suggested bringing Ethan here today. That detail surprised me. Denise suggested this trip. Yes. She saw an article about the sensory-friendly section and brought it to me. She said it might be a good experience for Ethan, and a nice break for you. James looked hopeful. I think seeing how well Ethan has been doing lately has changed something in her. She realizes he is not just going to grow out of it, or whatever she used to think. I wanted to believe him. For Ethan's sake, for James's sake, even for Taylor's sake, I wanted to believe that Denise could change. But years of subtle cruelty and jokes at Ethan's expense had made me wary. I hope you are right, was all I could say. My phone buzzed, and I nearly dropped it in my haste to check. It was a text from Denise, with a photo attached. Ethan having fun, stop worrying. The photo showed a blurry image of what seemed to be Ethan looking at something, but his face was not clearly visible. Something about the photo set off alarm bells. It was too blurry, too impersonal. If Denise was truly trying to reassure me, why not send a clearer picture? And why wasn't Taylor the one texting me? I tried calling Denise's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted back, "Where are you now? Is everything okay?" No response. James, something feels wrong. Denise is not answering. I stood up already, turning toward the direction of the sensory-friendly section. James pulled out his own phone. "Let me try Taylor." After a moment he shook his head. No answer from her either. They might be in an exhibit where they need to have phones silenced. "We need to go find them now," I said already, walking briskly toward the east side of the park. "They should be at the butterfly garden by now anyway." James followed, still trying to call both Denise and Taylor, as we pushed through the increasingly thick crowd. The 30 minutes we had agreed upon had stretched to nearly an hour, and with each passing minute my anxiety grew. We were halfway to the sensory section when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Taylor's name, and I answered immediately. "Taylor, is everything okay? Where are you guys?" What I heard made my blood run cold. Taylor was crying, her voice breaking between sobs. "Aunt Rebecca, you need to come quick. We are by the back exit of the space adventure ride. Mom said it was just a prank. But he will not wake up." "What happened?" I demanded, already running with James, close behind, confusion and fear on his face. "Taylor, what happened to Ethan?" Mom said. She said it would be funny to see his reaction. She took us to the space adventure ride instead of the dinosaurs. "It has all these strobe lights and loud noises." Taylor's voice cracked. "I told her we couldn't go there. I told her about his epilepsy, but she said you were exaggerating about how serious it is." She was recording him on her phone, saying she was going to post it online to show how kids like him overreact to everything. My heart felt like it would explode from my chest. The space adventure ride was everything Ethan needed to avoid intense strobe lighting, unexpected loud sounds, and crowded enclosed spaces. He started having a seizure as soon as we went inside. Taylor continued, her voice shaking. It was a bad one. He fell and hit his head on the railing. I tried to help him, but there were so many people. Mom just stood there filming at first. Then she got scared when he would not stop seizing. "Did you call an ambulance?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, as I pushed past people ignoring their annoyed expressions. Mom wouldn't let me. She said we would get in trouble for taking him there. She said it was just a joke gone wrong, and he would wake up soon. But it has been 20 minutes, and he is still not responding normally. He is breathing, but he will not look at me or talk. I had to sneak away to call you. "Listen to me carefully, Taylor," I said, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. "Stay with Ethan. Do not let your mother move him. We will be there in 5 minutes. If he starts seizing again, call 911 immediately, no matter what your mother says. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered. "Please hurry." I looked at James, who had only heard my side of the conversation, but could clearly see the panic on my face. "Denise took Ethan to the space adventure ride," I said, my voice trembling with rage and fear. "He had a seizure, hit his head, and now he is not waking up properly. She was filming him for social media, and would not let Taylor call for help." The color drained from James's face. "Oh my God, she couldn't be that cruel." But we both knew she could be, and she was. We ran the rest of the way, dodging through families and groups of teenagers, ignoring the curious and annoyed glances. All I could think about was Ethan, my sweet, vulnerable boy, who trusted me to keep him safe, and how I had failed him by leaving him with someone who had shown time and again that she did not respect his condition. The rage building inside me was unlike anything I had ever felt. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. Denise had deliberately put my son in danger for her amusement, for social media content, for some twisted desire to prove that his disability wasn't real or serious. After all the warnings, all the explanations, all the chances I had given her, she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. As we approached the space adventure ride, I spotted Taylor's bright red jacket. She was kneeling beside a bench, where Ethan lay motionless, his face pale, a small trickle of blood visible at his temple. Denise stood a few feet away, her expression a mix of irritation and worry, her phone still in her hand. In that moment, I knew our lives would never be the same. "Ethan," I cried out, rushing to the bench where my son lay motionless. His face was ghostly pale, a small trail of dried blood running from a cut on his temple. His eyes were partially open, but unfocused, staring at nothing. I dropped to my knees beside him, checking his pulse, his breathing. "Ethan, sweetie, can you hear me?" "It is Mom." No response. His breathing was regular, but he showed no sign of recognizing my voice. Taylor stood nearby, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to stop her, Aunt Rebecca. I swear I tried." "This is not your fault," I assured her, though. My eyes never left Ethan. Years of dealing with his medical emergencies had taught me to assess quickly. He had likely experienced a prolonged seizure, what doctors call status epilepticus, and the fall had caused a head injury. The lack of responsiveness was deeply concerning. Every minute without medical attention increased the risk of permanent damage. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, only then turning my attention to Denise, who stood several feet away, arms crossed defensively over her chest. "What is wrong with you?" I asked, my voice low and trembling with rage, as I waited for the emergency operator to answer. "You knew about his condition. You knew what could trigger a seizure." Denise scoffed, though I could see uncertainty in her eyes. "You are overreacting as usual. It was just a little joke. I wanted to show him something fun, not the baby rides in that special section. He is 9 years old, for God's sake. Other 9-year-olds can handle a simple ride." The 911 operator answered, and I quickly explained the situation: child with epilepsy, prolonged seizure, head injury, currently unresponsive, and our location. They promised to dispatch an ambulance immediately. As I put the phone away, James finally caught up to us, having been slowed by the crowds. The look on his face when he saw Ethan's condition was one of pure horror. "What did you do?" he asked Denise, his voice barely above a whisper. Denise threw up her hands. "Oh my God, not you too. It was a harmless prank. I just wanted to show him a real ride, not those pathetic kiddie attractions. How was I supposed to know he would freak out like that?" "Because we told you," I shouted, no longer able to contain my fury. "We have told you for years what his triggers are. Flashing lights, loud noises, crowds, everything that ride has. This wasn't a prank. This was deliberate cruelty." Taylor stepped forward, her young face set with determination despite her tears. "Mom, tell them the truth. Tell them what you said before we went in." Denise shot her daughter a warning look. "Taylor, be quiet. You are upset and confused." "No, I am not," Taylor insisted. "You said you wanted to film his meltdown to show your friends online how Rebecca enables him. You said it would be funny to see him act out, and that would prove he is just spoiled, not really disabled. You ignored me when I reminded you about his epilepsy." James stared at his wife, disbelief and disgust warring on his face. "Is that true? You did this on purpose to what, prove some point? Make fun of a disabled child? Our nephew?" "He is not disabled," Denise snapped. "He is just badly behaved, and Rebecca uses these so-called conditions as excuses. I was just trying to prove that." I turned away from her, unable to bear another second of her justifications. Ethan was starting to move slightly, a small whimper escaping his lips. I stroked his hair gently, careful to avoid the injury site. "It is okay, sweetheart. Help is coming. Mommy is here now." Park security arrived first, responding to the emergency call. I quickly explained the situation, and they cordoned off the area to give us privacy and make space for the incoming paramedics. One of the security guards, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, knelt beside me. "The ambulance is 2 minutes out. Can you tell me what happened exactly?" Before I could answer, Denise interjected. "It was an accident. The boy had some kind of fit and fell down. We were just having fun." The security guard looked at her skeptically before turning back to me. "Is your son epileptic?" "Yes," I confirmed. "He has autism and epilepsy. Flashing lights and loud sounds can trigger seizures. His aunt knew this, but took him into the space adventure ride anyway. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. It was just a joke, Denise insisted. I wanted to show that he... Ma'am, please step back, the security guard interrupted firmly. This child needs medical attention, not excuses. Sirens announced the arrival of the ambulance. 2 paramedics quickly made their way to us with a stretcher and medical equipment. I recited Ethan's medical history, medications, and the details of what happened as they assessed him. Looks like postictal state following a complex seizure with a minor head laceration, one paramedic said to the other. Pupils equal and reactive, which is good. Let's get him to County General. As they prepared to move Ethan to the stretcher, 2 police officers approached. The security guard had apparently called them after hearing our explanation of events. We received a report of a child endangered by a family member, one officer said, looking between all of us with a professional neutrality. Can someone explain what happened? James stepped forward. My wife, he gestured to Denise, deliberately took our nephew into an attraction that she knew could trigger his epilepsy. She was filming him to post online. That is a lie, Denise protested. It was a misunderstanding. The boy is fine, just being dramatic as usual. The officer looked at Ethan being loaded onto the stretcher, clearly unconscious, and raised an eyebrow at Denise's characterization. Officer Taylor said quietly, I saw everything. My mom planned this. She has the video on her phone right now. The second officer turned to Denise. Ma'am, I need to see your phone. Absolutely not. Denise clutched her phone to her chest. That is private property. You have no right. Given the circumstances and the allegation that you recorded a minor in distress, we have reasonable cause, the officer explained calmly. You can either show us voluntarily, or we can get a warrant, but that will mean you'll need to come to the station while we sort this out. I had to make a quick decision. Ethan needed me, but I also needed to make sure there were consequences for what Denise had done. I need to go with my son in the ambulance, I told the officers. But I want to press charges against my sister-in-law for knowingly endangering my child. The officers nodded. We'll take statements from everyone here, and we'll meet you at the hospital later to get your full statement. Denise's face, which had been flushed with indignation, suddenly went pale. Charges. You cannot be serious. It was a joke that went wrong. The first officer turned to her with a stern expression. Ma'am, deliberately exposing a child with a known medical condition to triggers that could cause them harm is not a joke. Now, I'll ask once more to see your phone. Shaking visibly now, Denise unlocked her phone and handed it over. The officer scrolled through it briefly, his expression darkening. There's a video here titled, Fake Seizure Prank on Nephew, that was apparently ready to upload to a social media account. James looked at his wife with an expression of complete betrayal. How could you? I couldn't bear to hear more. The paramedics were ready to transport Ethan, and nothing was more important than being with him. James, can you handle this? I need to go with Ethan. He nodded, his face ashen. Go. I'll deal with this situation and meet you at the hospital. As I climbed into the ambulance and took Ethan's limp hand in mine, I heard the officer telling Denise she needed to come to the station to answer some questions. Her protests faded as the ambulance doors closed, and we sped away toward the hospital, sirens blaring. In the sterile confines of the ambulance, watching the paramedics work on my unconscious son, the reality of what had happened hit me fully. Denise had not just been thoughtless or careless. She had deliberately put Ethan in danger to prove some twisted point, to get attention online, to satisfy her own cruel curiosity. And now my son, who had been making such wonderful progress, lay injured and unresponsive. The rage I felt was matched only by my guilt. I had left him with someone I knew in my heart could not be trusted. For the sake of family peace, for James and Taylor, for honoring Michael's wishes, I had compromised on Ethan's safety. I promised myself as the ambulance raced through traffic that I would never make that mistake again. No matter what happened next, nothing would ever be the same. The emergency room at County General was a blur of activity. Medical staff swarmed around Ethan as soon as we arrived, transferring him from the ambulance stretcher to a hospital bed. A doctor fired questions at me about his medical history, current medications, and the details of what had happened, while nurses hooked Ethan up to monitors and started an IV line. 9-year-old male history of autism and epilepsy, the lead doctor recited to her team. Witnessed tonic-clonic seizure with head injury, currently in postictal state. She turned to me. How long was the seizure? I wasn't there, I admitted, the words burning my throat with shame. My niece said it was several minutes at least, and he hit his head when he fell. The doctor nodded, shining a penlight into Ethan's eyes. Pupils equal and reactive, that is good. Has he experienced status epilepticus before? I ran through Ethan's seizure history, listing his medications, previous hospitalizations, and his neurologist's contact information. Years of medical appointments had taught me to be thorough and precise, even when my heart was breaking. Let's get him for a head CT right away, the doctor ordered, and call neurology for a consult. A nurse gently guided me to a chair beside Ethan's bed. We need to take him for the scan now, but you can wait here. It should only take about 20 minutes. As they wheeled Ethan away, I sat alone in the curtained emergency bay, his backpack clutched in my hands. The rage and fear that had propelled me through the last hour began to ebb, leaving a hollow exhaustion in its place. I called my mother, who lived an hour away, my voice breaking as I explained what had happened. I will be there as soon as I can, she promised. Have you heard anything more about Denise? Number James is handling that side of things. I just need to focus on Ethan right now. After hanging up, I sat staring at the empty space where Ethan's bed had been. How had I let this happen? All the warning signs had been there. Denise's history of jokes at Ethan's expense, her dismissal of his conditions, her subtle cruelty masked as concern. Yet I had still left him in her care. The curtain parted, and James entered, his face drawn and aged. He looked like he had lived 10 years in the last 2 hours. How is he? James asked, sinking into the chair beside me. They are doing a CT scan to check for brain injury. We will not know anything until that is done. I couldn't bring myself to look at him. Part of me blamed James almost as much as Denise. He had vouched for her, assured me she was changing, convinced me to leave Ethan with them. Rebecca, I am so sorry, James's voice cracked. I had no idea she would do something like this. I knew she could be insensitive, but this... He trailed off, shaking his head. Where is she now? I asked. At the police station. They are charging her with endangering the welfare of a child. He ran a hand through his hair. She is still claiming it was just a misunderstanding, a joke gone wrong. But the video on her phone... He couldn't finish the sentence. What did it show? I needed to know, even though it would hurt. James took a deep breath. She recorded herself before going into the ride, talking about how she was going to prove that Ethan's conditions were exaggerated. Then she filmed him as the ride started, as the lights began flashing. You can see the exact moment he begins to panic, and then when the seizure starts. And she kept filming for almost 30 seconds before Taylor started screaming at her to help. Bile rose in my throat. She watched him start seizing and just kept filming. Yes. And afterwards, she was telling Taylor not to call for help, that he was faking to get attention. Taylor was trying to help him while Denise was telling her to stop enabling him. James covered his face with his hands. I cannot believe I never saw this side of her. All these years I thought she was just blunt, maybe a little insensitive sometimes. I never imagined she could be deliberately cruel to a child. The doctor returned before I could respond, followed by a nurse wheeling Ethan back into the bay. He looked the same, still pale, still not fully conscious, but at least not visibly worse. Good news, the doctor said. The CT doesn't show any significant brain injury. There's a mild concussion from the fall, but no bleeding or swelling that we can see. His neurological responses are improving. I felt a wave of relief so intense it made me dizzy, So, he's going to be okay. I believe so, yes. But we're still concerned about the prolonged seizure. Has he been sleep-deprived lately, missed any medications, or experienced any other triggers in the past few days? No, nothing, I said. He has been stable for months. It was the lights and noise from that ride. It was exactly the kind of environment his neurologist warned us to avoid. The doctor nodded grimly. I understand this wasn't an accident. The police called to let us know they might need medical documentation for their case. Will there be any lasting effects? James asked, his voice small and guilty. It's too early to say for certain, but children are remarkably resilient. The biggest concern with prolonged seizures is oxygen deprivation. But his oxygen levels have been good since the paramedics arrived. We'll need to monitor him overnight, and he'll probably be disoriented and tired for a few days. His neurologist will want to reassess his medication regimen. A small sound from the bed drew our attention. Ethan's eyes were fluttering and his fingers twitched against the white hospital sheet. Ethan, I moved to his side, taking his hand gently. Can you hear me, sweetie? It's Mom. His eyes opened, fully unfocused at first, then gradually finding my face. Mom. His voice was weak and confused. Head hurts. Tears of relief spilled down my cheeks. I know, baby. You're in the hospital, but you're going to be okay. Ethan's gaze moved past me to James, and a flash of fear crossed his face. Where's Aunt Denise? She was mad. The lights were too bright. She's not here, I assured him quickly. She won't be around anymore. You're safe. The doctor observed our interaction with professional interest. His verbal responses are good. That's an excellent sign. We'll get him settled in a pediatric room upstairs for overnight observation. As the doctor left to arrange the admission, my mother arrived, her face tight with worry. She rushed to Ethan's bedside, stroking his hair gently away from the small bandage where they had cleaned his head wound. My brave boy, she murmured before turning to me with fire in her eyes. Where is that woman now? Still at the police station, I think, James answered, shrinking slightly under my mother's glare. Good. I hope they throw the book at her. My mother had never liked Denise, her instincts proving far more accurate than mine. A soft knock at the curtain announced Taylor's arrival. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she hesitated at the entrance, uncertain of her welcome. Can I come in? She asked in a small voice. Of course, I said immediately. No matter what Denise had done, Taylor was innocent, more than innocent. She had tried to protect Ethan. Taylor approached the bed slowly, her eyes fixed on Ethan's pale face. I'm so sorry, Aunt Rebecca. I should have stopped her somehow. This is not your fault, I said firmly. You tried to help Ethan. You called me when your mother wouldn't. You probably prevented this from being much worse. Ethan's eyes opened again at the sound of Taylor's voice. Taylor, he said weakly. You helped. Not mad at you. Even in his confused state, Ethan understood what mattered, that Taylor had been on his side. The simple clarity of his forgiveness brought fresh tears to my eyes. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity as Ethan was moved to a pediatric room. The neurologist on call examined him and adjusted his anti-seizure medication. A police officer came to take my formal statement, explaining the charges against Denise in technical language that boiled down to one simple truth. What she had done was not just cruel, but criminal. James left to deal with Denise's situation but promised to return. Taylor stayed sitting quietly beside Ethan's bed, occasionally showing him pictures of butterflies on her phone when he was awake enough to look. As evening fell, Ethan finally drifted into a more natural sleep, the doctors assuring me this was normal and healthy after a seizure. My mother went to my house to pack overnight bags for Ethan and me, and Taylor reluctantly left to stay with her grandmother, James's mother. Alone with my sleeping son, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Denise had deliberately put Ethan in danger, to prove a point, to create content for social media, to satisfy some twisted need to expose what she saw as fakery. The depth of her cruelty was staggering. But what haunted me most was my own role in this disaster. I had ignored my instincts, silenced my concerns, prioritized family harmony over Ethan's safety. Never again, I vowed. From now on, Ethan's well-being would come first, no matter whose feelings got hurt in the process. As I watched the gentle rise and fall of his chest, I made another silent promise this would not break him. Whatever challenges came from this trauma, we would face them together. Denise had tried to expose Ethan as weak as fake, but she had only revealed his strength and her own profound weakness. The night stretched long before us, but for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. Ethan was alive, he was healing, and no matter what came next, we would face it together. The next morning, Ethan woke disoriented but more alert than the previous day. The pediatric neurologist Dr. Martinez came early to examine him, her gentle manner putting both of us at ease. The good news is that there does not appear to be any permanent neurological damage, she explained after completing her assessment. The bad news is that this severe seizure may have reset his threshold. We might see an increase in seizure activity for a while, until his brain stabilizes again. My heart sank. Ethan had been doing so well, nearly 6 months, without a major episode. So, we are back to square one. Dr. Martinez smiled sympathetically. Not quite square one. Think of it more as a setback rather than starting over. We will adjust his medications, and I want to see him for follow-up in my office next week. But children are remarkably resilient. Ethan was discharged that afternoon, with instructions for increased monitoring and a temporary increase in his anti-seizure medication. He was quiet on the drive home, staring out the window with a solemn expression that broke my heart. The carefree joy he had shown the previous morning, excited about butterflies and dinosaurs, seemed a distant memory. At home, my mother had prepared his favorite foods and arranged his bedroom with all his comfort items. Ethan went straight to his weighted blanket, wrapping himself tightly and curling into a ball on his bed. "Is Uncle James mad at me?" he asked in a small voice. I sat beside him, careful not to touch him, until he indicated it was okay. "No, sweetie. No one is mad at you. What happened was not your fault." Aunt Denise said I was pretending, said I was bad. His voice was muffled by the blanket. Rage flared inside me again, but I kept my tone gentle. Aunt Denise was wrong. You are not bad and you are not pretending. You have a medical condition called epilepsy. Remember. We have talked about how certain things can trigger seizures. Aunt Denise did something very wrong by taking you somewhere with those triggers. He was quiet for a long moment. She is not coming back. She is not coming back. He nodded once, then closed his eyes, exhaustion claiming him again. I sat with him until his breathing deepened into sleep, then quietly left the room, leaving the door cracked so I could hear if he needed me. In the kitchen, my mother was making tea, her movements sharp with suppressed anger. "Have you heard anything more about the charges against that woman?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was James. "Rebecca, can we talk? I am outside." I had not expected him so soon. "I will be right out," I told him, not wanting him to come inside and risk waking Ethan. James was sitting in his car in my driveway, looking like he had aged a decade in 2 days. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his normally neat appearance was disheveled. "How is Ethan?" he asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "Physically, he should recover. Emotionally." I shook my head. "I do not know yet. He is asking if you are mad at him." James closed his eyes. Briefly, pain etched on his face. "My God. Of course not. Can I see him?" "Not today. He needs rest. Maybe in a few days." I studied James's haggard face. What happened with Denise? He took a deep breath. "She was released on bail this morning. She is facing charges of child endangerment and possibly assault. Her lawyer is already trying to plea it down, claiming she did not understand the severity of Ethan's condition." "That is bullshit," I said flatly. "She knew exactly what she was doing." "I know." James stared straight ahead through the windshield. "The police showed me the full video from her phone. It was, Rebecca, it was deliberate. She narrated what she was doing, talked about how she was going to prove you were coddling him. She called it exposure therapy, but laughed while saying it. There was nothing therapeutic about her intentions. My stomach turned. Are they using the video as evidence? Yes, and that is not all. They found dozens of posts and messages on her social media accounts, mocking Ethan, questioning his diagnoses, even making fun of his meltdowns. She had a whole private group where she would post about him, calling him the little faker, and worse. I closed my eyes trying to process the depth of Denise's cruelty. All those years while smiling to my face and playing the reluctant but accommodating aunt, she had been secretly mocking and denigrating my child. There is more, James said, his voice dropping even lower. I am filing for separation. I cannot. After seeing what she did, what she is capable of, I cannot stay married to her. The declaration did not surprise me, but the finality in his tone did. What about Taylor? She refuses to speak to her mother. She is staying with my parents for now, but she wants to live with me. She is 15, old enough that the court will consider her preference. He finally turned to look at me. Rebecca, I am so sorry. I should have seen what Denise was. I should have protected Ethan. The apology was sincere, but insufficient in the face of what had happened. Still, I could see James was suffering too. His family shattered, his image of his wife, destroyed his relationship with his daughter, strained by his failure to see the truth sooner. I am not ready to forgive, I said honestly. But I do not blame you the way I blame Denise. You were blind, but she was deliberate. James nodded, accepting my limited absolution. The prosecutor wants to talk to you tomorrow about your statement. They are taking this very seriously. The video evidence is compelling. A week later, I sat across from Assistant District Attorney Sandra Kane, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with shrewd eyes and a reputation for being tough but fair. Mrs. Pierce, I will be blunt. We have a strong case against your sister-in-law. The video evidence alone is damning, and her social media history shows a pattern of deliberate cruelty toward your son. She slid a folder across her desk. These are screenshots of some of her posts about Ethan. I warn you, they are difficult to read. The posts were worse than I had imagined. Years of mockery, cruel jokes about Ethan's behaviors, suggestions that I was using his diagnoses for attention or financial benefits. In one particularly vicious post from just 3 months ago, she had written, "Another family dinner ruined by the little drama king." If his seizures are so real, why do they only happen when he's not getting enough attention? There are hundreds more like this, Ada Kane said, as I pushed the folder away, unable to read any further. Her account was private, but she had nearly 50 followers, a group dedicated to mocking children with disabilities. Some of them are now being investigated as well. I felt physically ill. I had no idea. Few people recognize this kind of cruelty until it escalates. Mrs. Pierce, I believe we can make a strong case, but I want to prepare you. Her defense will likely try to minimize what happened, claim it was a misunderstanding or an accident. They may even try to paint you as overprotective, or Ethan's condition as exaggerated. I have 9 years of medical records that say otherwise, I said, anger sharpening my voice. Yes, and we'll use those. But court cases can be difficult, especially ones involving family. Are you prepared for that? I thought of Ethan, who still woke with nightmares, who flinched at sudden movements, whose seizure activity had indeed increased, just as Dr. Martinez had warned. Yes, whatever it takes. The preliminary hearing was set for the following month. In the meantime, a temporary restraining order was put in place, legally barring Denise from coming near Ethan or contacting us in any way. Word of what had happened spread through our community. To my surprise, support poured in from unexpected places. Parents from Ethan's special education class organized a meal train. His therapists offered extra sessions at reduced rates. Even neighbors I barely knew stopped by with cards and small gifts for Ethan. Taylor became a regular visitor, her devotion to Ethan unwavering. She seemed determined to make up for her mother's cruelty with her own kindness. She researched new therapies, learned about epilepsy management, and spent hours just sitting with Ethan, respecting his need for quiet, while offering gentle companionship. James kept his distance at first, understanding that his presence might be difficult for Ethan. But he called regularly to check on his nephew's progress and sent thoughtful gifts, books about dinosaurs, a star projector that created gentle, non-triggering light patterns on the ceiling, a subscription to a science magazine for children. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived with a sense of grim purpose. I had prepared Ethan for my absence, assuring him that my mother would stay with him, and that I was going to make sure Aunt Denise could never hurt him again. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, the atmosphere tense and formal. Denise sat with her attorney dressed conservatively in a navy blue suit, her expression a careful mask of contrition. When our eyes met briefly, I saw not remorse, but calculation. She was playing a role, the misunderstood aunt, who had made a regrettable mistake. The evidence presentation was brutal. The prosecutor methodically built a case, showing not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a pattern of deliberate cruelty, culminating in an action that could have caused permanent harm or even death. The video from Denise's phone was played in court, and I forced myself to watch as she narrated her plan, as she led Ethan into that triggering environment, as she laughed while he began to show signs of distress. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the stand with steady determination. I described Ethan's conditions, his progress, and the devastating setback caused by Denise's actions. I explained the years of small cruelties I had dismissed or excused for the sake of family harmony. Mrs. Pierce, Denise's attorney asked during cross-examination, "Isn't it possible that my client simply didn't fully understand the severity of Ethan's condition, that this was a misguided attempt to help him overcome his fears?" I looked directly at Denise as I answered. "Number?" She was told repeatedly, explicitly about his triggers and the dangers they posed. She was shown his medical records. She witnessed seizures before. She knew exactly what she was doing and what the consequences could be. She simply didn't care. The judge's ruling was unequivocal. There was more than enough evidence to proceed to trial. Denise's bail conditions were tightened, and the restraining order was extended indefinitely. Outside the courthouse, Denise's attorney approached me with an offer. Denise would plead guilty to a lesser charge of reckless endangerment if I agreed not to pursue the more serious charges. She's prepared to accept 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service and mandatory counseling, the lawyer explained. It would spare all of you, especially Ethan, the trauma of a trial. I considered the offer. A trial would be difficult, would force Ethan to relive the trauma, might even require him to testify. But the proposed punishment seemed inadequate for the deliberate cruelty Denise had shown. After consulting with the prosecutor and much reflection, I agreed to the plea deal with additional conditions. The community service had to be performed at an organization serving disabled children. Denise would have to complete an educational program about epilepsy and autism, and the restraining order would remain permanent. 2 weeks later, I watched as Denise stood before the judge and admitted her guilt, though her apology sounded rehearsed and hollow. The judge was not fooled. "Mrs. Wilson, what you did was not a prank or a joke. It was a deliberate act of cruelty against a vulnerable child, a child who should have been able to trust you as family. Your actions reflect a disturbing lack of empathy and a willingness to cause harm for your own amusement. I accept this plea agreement only because it spares the victim further trauma, not because I believe the punishment fits the crime." As Denise was led away to begin processing her probation, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. There was only the grim knowledge that justice, imperfect as it was, had been served, and the determination that Ethan would never again be exposed to such deliberate cruelty. Outside the courthouse, James waited, his expression solemn. "Is it over?" "This part is," I said. "Now we focus on helping Ethan heal." 6 months after the incident at the amusement park, Ethan sat on a bench in our backyard, carefully examining a butterfly that had landed on the flowering bush beside him. His movements were cautious, deliberate, his face a study in concentration. This was our new normal, a mix of the old Ethan curious and gentle with the new wariness that the trauma had left behind. The physical recovery had been relatively straightforward. The concussion healed within weeks, and eventually with medication adjustments his seizure activity stabilized again. But the emotional scars ran deeper. Ethan now had new fears: crowds, sudden movements, bright lights, and a wariness around unfamiliar adults that broke my heart. He would ask repeatedly before trying anything new, "Is it safe? Are you sure?" We had found a therapist specializing in trauma in children with autism, Dr. Lena Cooper, who used a combination of play therapy and cognitive behavioral techniques adapted for Ethan's unique needs. She had a gentle, patient approach that gradually helped Ethan process what had happened. "He is making remarkable progress," Dr. Cooper told me during one of our parent sessions. "Children his age often struggle to articulate trauma, but Ethan has found ways to express what happened and how it made him feel." One of those ways was through his artwork. Ethan had always enjoyed drawing, but now it became a crucial outlet. His early post-trauma drawings had been dark and chaotic, harsh scribbles of black and red paper, sometimes torn by the force of his crayon. Gradually other colors began to appear: blues and greens, then yellows. The jagged lines softened. In his most recent drawing, he had created a scene of himself surrounded by a circle of people he identified as his safe people: me, Taylor James, his grandma, his teachers, Dr. Cooper. Notably absent was Denise. He never asked about her anymore. James had become an unexpected source of support. After filing for divorce, he had moved into an apartment nearby and committed himself to rebuilding his relationship with Ethan. He approached this mission with humility and patience, understanding that trust once broken could not be demanded, but had to be earned. "I brought something for Ethan," James said one afternoon, holding a small box wrapped in dinosaur-patterned paper. "It is a special watch. It monitors heart rate and has a button he can press if he starts feeling anxious or fuzzy. It will send an alert to your phone with his exact location." The thoughtfulness of the gift moved me. James had done research, had considered not just Ethan's interests, but his needs and fears. This was not the same man who had once dismissed my concerns about Denise's behavior as oversensitivity. "Thank you," I said, accepting the package. "He will love this, and it will help him feel more secure when we are out." Taylor had blossomed in her new role as Ethan's fiercest advocate. Now, living primarily with James, she spent many afternoons at our house, doing her homework at the kitchen table, while Ethan played nearby, offering him the quiet companionship he preferred. She had joined a youth group at school that promoted disability awareness and had even given a presentation about autism and epilepsy to her classmates. "I am thinking about becoming a special education teacher," she confided to me one day. "Or maybe a child psychologist. I want to help kids like Ethan." The trauma had changed all of us, reshaping our priorities and perspectives. For me, the most profound change was learning to trust my instincts without apology. For years I had silenced my concerns about Denise, had second-guessed my protective impulses, had prioritized family harmony over Ethan's well-being. Never again. The greatest disservice we can do to ourselves is to ignore that little voice inside us that senses danger, Dr. Cooper said during one of our sessions. That voice evolved to protect us and those we love. Your instincts about Denise were right all along. This lesson led me to create boundaries in other areas of my life as well. I declined invitations to events that would be overwhelming for Ethan rather than trying to force him to adapt. I became more selective about who we spent time with, choosing to surround us with people who genuinely accepted and supported Ethan, rather than those who merely tolerated him. I learned to say no without guilt, and yes with genuine enthusiasm. Another unexpected outcome was the community that formed around us. What began as a meal train during those difficult early weeks evolved into a support network of parents, educators, and advocates. Seeing how isolated many parents of special needs children felt, I started a monthly coffee group that quickly grew into a formal support organization. We shared resources, offered respite care to each other, and created a safe space where the unique challenges of raising children with disabilities could be discussed without judgment. James became involved as well, using his skills as an accountant to help the group incorporate as a nonprofit. He and I worked together to establish a foundation in Ethan's name that provided sensory equipment to local schools and funding for teacher training on disability inclusion. What Denise had tried to destroy Ethan's dignity and our family bonds had instead become the seed of something powerful and positive. 1 year after the incident, we celebrated a milestone: Ethan's first return to a public park since the trauma. It was a small, quiet neighborhood space, carefully chosen for its low-stimulation environment and familiar layout. We went early in the morning when few other children would be there, and we had practiced the visit through social stories and role-play with Dr. Cooper. Ethan approached the playground cautiously, holding my hand tightly. Taylor walked on his other side, James a few steps behind, all of us alert to any signs of distress. But as Ethan grew comfortable, his grip loosened. He moved toward the swings, always his favorite, and allowed James to push him gently. The sound of his laughter rare since the trauma was like music. It was not the carefree abandonment of before. There was still a watchfulness in his eyes. But it was genuine joy nonetheless, a small victory in our long journey of healing. That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he asked a question that caught me off guard. "Mom, are some people just bad?" I sat on the edge of his bed, considering how to answer truthfully, while honoring his need for security. "I do not think people are born bad, sweetheart. I think people make choices. Some people make harmful choices because they are hurting, or because they do not understand, or sometimes because they care more about themselves than about others' feelings." "Like Aunt Denise," he said matter-of-factly. Yes, I acknowledged, not shying away from the truth. She made very harmful choices that hurt you, and that was wrong. But her choices are about her, not about you. You did nothing to deserve what happened. He was quiet for a moment, processing this. Taylor makes good choices, and Uncle James is trying to make better choices now. "That is very true," I said, touched by his insight. "People can learn and change and do better. That is an important thing to remember." The wisdom in his simple observation struck me deeply. In his own way, Ethan had articulated one of the most profound lessons of our ordeal: people reveal themselves through their choices, and while we cannot control others' actions, we can choose who deserves a place in our lives. The scars from that day will always remain with us, but they have healed into something stronger. And in that strength, I found a voice, not just for Ethan, but for all the children who cannot speak for themselves. Through our foundation, our support group, and our daily choices, we work to create a world where children like Ethan are valued and protected, where difference is not just tolerated, but celebrated. If you have ever had to stand up against family for the sake of your child, or if you have found yourself questioning whether your protective instincts are too much, please know that you are not alone. The journey of raising a child with special needs can be isolating, but it does not have to be. There are communities waiting to embrace you, people who understand without explanation and strength within you that you may not yet realize. The most beautiful lesson Ethan has taught me is that true resilience is not about returning to who you were before trauma, but about growing into someone new, someone wiser, more compassionate, and ultimately stronger. What are the lessons your children have taught you through life's challenges? Share your story in the comments below, and let us build a community of understanding together. Do not forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and remember that every time you share these stories, you help another parent feel less alone in their journey. Thank you for being part of our healing, and I wish you strength and peace on your own path.